You're standing in a Costco parking lot on a random Tuesday night, and the guy 2 spots over is loading a giant flat screen into the back of a brand new truck that still has dealer plates on it. The truck is spotless. The rims are ridiculous. The payment is probably even more ridiculous. And the weird part is, he does not look richer than you. He just looks busier, more stressed, more committed to looking like somebody. That is where the trouble starts, because the moment you get to $1 million net worth, the game stops being about impressing people and starts being about protecting a machine. And that shift changes everything. My name is Nico, and today we're going to talk about why everything changes after you reach $1 million net worth. Not because money magically fixes your life, not because you suddenly become happier or smarter, but because once you cross that line, every single financial choice starts to reveal something deeper about your identity, your discipline, and your future. So if this kind of money truth matters to you, hit subscribe and thumbs up, because this is exactly the stuff we break down here. Here's the first thing most people never realize. The world around you is already built to make normal spending feel invisible. In 2023, the average US consumer unit spent $77,280 a year, with housing taking 32.9% and transportation taking 17.0% of the budget. That means a huge chunk of ordinary life is already flowing into two categories that quietly eat wealth before you ever notice it. And the Federal Reserve's 2022 household data showed that 73% of adults said they were doing at least okay financially, which sounds decent until you realize how many people are still one car repair, one rent jump, or one status purchase away from feeling squeezed again. And that is the setup, because at $1 million net worth, you are no longer trying to survive month to month. You are no longer asking, can I make it to Friday? You are asking a much more dangerous question. What kind of life do I actually want to build from here? And here's where it gets really interesting. The exact same spending habit that barely mattered at $50,000 net worth can become a silent wealth leak at $1 million. Not because the amount is huge in isolation, but because now every decision has a compounding shadow behind it. Let me show you the math. Imagine two people, Clay and Hannah. Clay hits $1 million net worth at 41. He owns his home, has a healthy brokerage account, and finally feels like he can breathe. Hannah is in a similar income range, maybe even a little lower. She does not have the same balance sheet yet, but she is building aggressively. Clay thinks the finish line means he can loosen up. Hannah thinks the finish line means the real game is finally starting. Clay goes out and buys a $72,000 SUV because he earned it. The payment is manageable. The insurance is higher, but still fine. The maintenance is not outrageous yet. So on the surface, nothing looks catastrophic. But the car is not just a car. It is a decision to convert invested capital into a depreciating object with ongoing carrying costs. If that $72,000 stayed invested and earned a long-run 7% annual return, over 30 years, it would grow to roughly $548,000. And that is the part that hits people in the chest. The car is never just the sticker price. It is the future version of that money that you will never get to use. That is opportunity cost, and the math is brutal. Now, Hannah looks at the same situation and asks a different question. What is the real cost of this upgrade? She is not asking whether she can afford the payment. She is asking whether this choice still makes sense when her money has new responsibilities. Because once you reach $1 million, the question is no longer, can I afford this? It becomes, what does this take from the next 10 years of my life? And that's the crazy part. At $1 million net worth, even a 1% drag is $10,000. A 2% drag is $20,000. That means the wrong money decisions stop being small. They become annual taxes on your future, not government taxes, lifestyle taxes, emotional taxes, identity taxes. Here's the psychological layer most people miss. When you get close to real wealth, your brain does not always become more rational. Sometimes it becomes more vulnerable, because once you have something to lose, the ego starts negotiating. It says, you worked hard, you deserve the nicer house. It says, you can finally travel like you mean it. It says, everyone else is upgrading, so why shouldn't you? And the marketing machine loves this moment. Dealerships do not sell vehicles. They sell identity relief. Luxury brands do not sell leather and steel. They sell status insulation. Social media does not just show you what people own. It trains you to compare your private life to somebody else's highlight reel. And this is why money gets weird right around the point where it starts to matter most. Because before $1 million, people think wealth is about accumulation. After $1 million, you realize wealth is about restraint. The skills are different. The temptations are different. The losses are different. Before the threshold, the danger is not having enough. After the threshold, the danger is becoming sloppy with what took you 15 years to build. I want to give you another example. Troy is 39. He has a paid-off condo, a solid portfolio, and about $1.1 million net worth. He tells himself he is finally allowed to relax. So he starts spending like the pressure is gone. Nice dinners, bigger vacations, a newer truck, better flights, more quality of life purchases. Nothing dramatic on its own, just a little bit more everywhere. Then one day he does the actual math, not the emotional math, the real math. His spending is up by $1,800 a month compared to 2 years ago. That is $21,600 a year. If that extra amount had stayed invested at 7% for 20 years, it would have become about $1.5 million. Not a typo. One lifestyle shift compounded over time turns into a 7-figure difference. And that is the hidden danger of, I can afford it now. You are often measuring affordability in this year's cash flow while ignoring the 20-year blast radius. That is why people who build and keep wealth think differently. They do not ask, will this make my life slightly nicer today? They ask, what is the recurring cost, the identity cost, and the compounding cost? Because a $900 car payment is not just $900. It is the insurance, the fuel, the maintenance, the pressure to keep up the rest of the image, the guilt when the thing you bought starts normalizing other upgrades. One purchase does not stay one purchase for long. It creates a financial ecosystem around itself. And here's the uncomfortable truth. Most middle-class people do not lose wealth because of one giant mistake. They lose it because of 100 emotionally understandable little ones. The nicer apartment, the better car, the last-minute trip, the we're only young once spending, the subscription stack, the impulse buys that are technically affordable but strategically expensive. None of these choices are evil, but together they can turn a millionaire into someone who still feels broke in the exact places that matter. But here's the part that will blow your mind. At $1 million net worth, the same money that buys status can also buy freedom. And those are not the same thing. Let's say your $1 million is invested in a diversified portfolio and earns a long-run 7% average annual return. That is about $70,000 a year before taxes and before any drawdowns. Now, depending on your spending, that means $1 million can either be a fragile trophy or a real engine. If you're spending $40,000 to $50,000 a year, the money has room to breathe. If you're spending $90,000 or $100,000 a year, the money is working overtime just to keep you in place. Same net worth, completely different reality. That is why $1 million changes everything psychologically. Because at that level, you are no longer measuring wealth only by the number in the account. You are measuring the relationship between your lifestyle and your capital. A person with $1 million and $45,000 annual spending has a very different future than a person with $1 million and $95,000 annual spending. One is building a moat, the other is floating near the edge and hoping the returns cooperate. And let me be fair here, because this is where people get defensive. Yes, you may genuinely need a truck for work. Yes, old cars do break down. Yes, travel can be meaningful. Yes, nice things are not inherently bad. I'm not saying you should live like a monk and never enjoy your money. That is not the point. The point is to stop pretending every spending decision is neutral, because it is not neutral when the truck is bigger than your actual need. It is not neutral when the vacation becomes a performance for Instagram. It is not neutral when the house is bought to impress relatives instead of support your life. It is not neutral when the reward becomes a recurring obligation that quietly narrows your options. That is the real cost most people never calculate. They calculate the monthly payment. They do not calculate the future freedom they traded away. And that's where identity gets involved. The people who keep wealth after crossing $1 million tend to become harder to manipulate, not softer. They stop needing every purchase to say something about them. They start caring more about optionality than optics. They understand that a simple life is not a lesser life. In many cases, it is the more powerful one because it preserves decision-making power. It keeps your calendar cleaner. It keeps your stress lower. It lets you say no without fear. That is a form of wealth most people do not recognize until they lose it. The industry around you knows this better than you do. Car ads do not just sell horsepower. They sell the feeling that your current life is incomplete. Real estate ads do not just sell square footage. They sell belonging. Travel ads do not just sell a destination, they sell the promise that the next experience will finally make you feel like the person you are supposed to be. But the moment you start using purchases to solve identity discomfort, the math gets ugly fast, because money is very bad at solving emotional gaps that should have been handled with clarity, boundaries, or self-respect. So what actually changes after $1 million? First, the consequences of bad decisions get larger because the base is larger. At $100,000 net worth, a bad decision is painful. At $1 million, a bad decision is expensive in a way that can delay generational goals, freedom goals, and retirement goals all at once. Second, your time horizon expands. A person with real capital stops thinking in weeks and starts thinking in decades. This is why the wealthy often seem boring to people who are still trapped in consumption mode. They are not boring. They are patient. They are calculating. They have already seen what impulsive money behavior costs over time. Third, your standard changes. Not your standard of luxury necessarily, your standard of reasoning. You become more suspicious of emotional purchases. You become more interested in what life feels like without friction, not just what it looks like from the outside. Fourth, your money starts to reflect your character more clearly. Before $1 million, everybody can say they are still figuring it out. After $1 million, the excuses shrink. The habits become visible. The discipline becomes visible. The avoidance becomes visible. The difference between someone who preserves wealth and someone who leaks it is rarely intelligence. It is usually honesty. Now, one pushback I hear all the time is, but you can't take it with you. And yes, that is true. You cannot take the money with you, but you absolutely can take the consequences of how you used it. You can take the freedom. You can take the lack of stress. You can take the ability to help family without panic. You can take the flexibility to change jobs, move cities, survive a recession, or walk away from bad situations. Those things are real. Those things matter, and they often come from not spending like every dollar is trying to prove something. Another pushback is, I want to enjoy my life now, not just later. Fair. That is a legitimate concern, but the real question is whether your enjoyment is deliberate or reactive. There is a massive difference between spending on purpose and spending because you are tired, insecure, overstimulated, or trying to keep up. One creates a life, the other leaks one. Let me show you the math one more time because this is where the emotional haze clears. Suppose you take $50,000 and leave it invested instead of buying a status purchase. At 7% over 30 years, that is about $381,000. Now imagine you do that repeatedly over your adult life. One avoided car upgrade, one smaller house, one less flashy cycle, 1 year of restrained travel, one moment where you choose peace over image. None of those choices sounds glamorous in isolation, but together they can decide whether $1 million becomes your ceiling or your floor. And that is why everything changes after $1 million. Not because the number is magical, but because your margin for error finally becomes meaningful. Before that, wealth feels like something you are trying to reach. After that, wealth becomes something you are responsible for protecting. That is a completely different psychological state. It forces maturity, it punishes nonsense, it rewards patience. If you reach $1 million and still feel the need to prove yourself through every purchase, the money will never feel like enough. But if you reach $1 million and start asking better questions, the money starts working like it is supposed to, not as a trophy, as a tool. Not as proof that you made it, as proof that you can think clearly under temptation. And that is the real identity shift. You stop being the person who asks, what can I buy? And start becoming the person who asks, what does this choice cost me over the next 10 years? That one question changes everything. It changes your car decisions. It changes your housing decisions. It changes your travel decisions. It changes how you respond to pressure from friends, family, and social media. It changes what kind of future you quietly build while everybody else is busy performing. The difference between affording something and being trapped by it is often just one honest calculation. Just one moment where you stop listening to the emotional pitch and actually run the numbers. And once you do that enough times, you become the kind of person who is hard to bait, hard to manipulate, and hard to derail. That is a rare kind of wealth. And honestly, it is the kind that lasts. So keep building, keep the margin, keep the boring decisions that compound into freedom. And remember, the goal is not to look rich for a few years. The goal is to become the kind of person who can say yes to what matters because you said no to what did not. If this video gave you a new way to think about money, subscribe for more and drop a comment with the one expense you would audit first: car, housing, or travel. And as always, this is general education, not personal financial advice, so run the numbers for your own situation before making a move.